The Positive Pause is a motivational-minded podcast covering topics women want to know about as they journey to and through menopause, focusing on subjects that impact women's health and healthy aging, including what it means to age healthfully. The Positive Pause features experts and influencers from a variety of industries and specialties. The information and opinions expressed on the Positive Pause are not intended to replace the services of trained professionals or to provide specific medical advice. To see the National Menopause Foundation's full medical disclaimer, please visit nationalmenopausefoundation.org.
Welcome to the Positive Pause. I'm Tandy Leblang, one of the founding members and secretary of the board of the National Menopause Foundation. I'm looking forward to speaking to fellow registered dietitians Wright and Elizabeth Ward, authors of the Menopause Diet Plan, a natural guide to managing hormones, health, and happiness. Wright is a registered dietitian and author of the PCOS Diet Plan and the Diabetes Diet Plan. She is Director of Nutrition Counseling for the Domar Center for Mind-Body Health at Boston IVF, a Harvard-affiliated fertility treatment center. She also works part-time as a senior nutritionist at the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute in Boston and is founding member of the nutrition technology company Good Measures. Elizabeth Ward is a registered dietitian with more than 30 years of counseling patients and writing about nutrition. She's an experienced recipe developer and food photographer and author or co-author of several books, including Super Nutrition After 50, Live Longer and Better, and Expect the Best, your guide to healthy eating before, during, and after pregnancy. Ward blogs about health, lifestyle, and at Better is the New Perfect. Thank you so much for speaking with me today, Hillary and Liz.
Thanks for having us.
So what are the biggest misconceptions women have about what they should eat during perimenopause and menopause?
So I think I wanted to kind of frame that question by pointing out two things, and they both involve, kind of what kinds of things women think they should eat and how they should eat and all of that. And so the first, I think, misconception is that if you just try hard enough and do the right thing, that you can prevent your body from changing with age, because we live in such a youthful society. And Liz and I have talked about this a lot. We're interested in helping people become the best version of themselves, which includes accepting that bodies do change to some degree over time, but we can certainly influence that with our lifestyle. The other thing too is that, and we really noticed this since the book came out and we are, on a lot of other social media around this topic, is that pretty much everything that happens to women's bodies midlife frequently gets attributed to menopause. And the reality is, when we look at the research, it's really hard to tease out how, what of some of these health effects are specifically related to changing hormones with menopause versus just aging. Because a lot happens in women's lives between, 40 and 60 that can influence their physical health, their mental health, and all of that. So we come at this from a positive standpoint of, it's not, eat this, don't eat that. It is, what are you eating most of the time? And occasionally do whatever you want, because we're supposed to like food and we're all entitled to some food for fun. So because women are often exposed to so much kind of dieting talk, it does often break down to certain things you can't eat and certain things you should only eat. And we actually deal with that quite a bit and don't believe that that is true. So we think that all foods can fit into a healthful eating plan, but there certainly needs to be some attention to aspects related to portions, et cetera.
All right. So on that same topic, as we go through menopause, how do vitamin and mineral needs change? And specifically, are there nutrients that they need more of and any they need less of? And what about the other macronutrients?
So that is a very broad question. I'm going to try to break it down. So as you get older, generally speaking, you need fewer calories. Now, that's a general conception, let's say. Unless you sort of become way more active than you ever were, or you somehow gained a lot of muscle mass. What's going on as you get older is you're losing muscle mass gradually, starting in your 40s with any significance. So that means that, you're going to have to eat less carbohydrate, but because your body doesn't handle it as well starting in midlife. and perhaps more protein, and then healthy fats. So the way that we look at the macronutrients, the big nutrients, not the vitamins and minerals, is that we would like to see a change in the distribution into the 40s and 50s and 60s, where it's not a high protein diet per se, but a lot of the refined carbohydrates, need to really be looked at and maybe eliminated to a certain extent.
Just to help people understand, how would you define refined carbohydrates?
So, basically added sugar is just one of the biggest categories of refined carbohydrates that, we find. There's just added sugar in so many things, so many highly processed foods. So I'd say that we're not against white pasta, white rice, white bread. But, the recommendation is that, at least half of your grains should be whole grains. So, focusing more on whole grains and kind of leaving the refined grains as something that you do half of the time, but not all of the time, and just rethinking that whole category.
So you kind of touched on that, but I was going to say, please translate these necessary nutrients into what people should eat more of and less of. So less refined carbohydrates, less added sugars. Anything else?
Well, sure. More of, the foods with the good carbohydrates in them and fiber, let's say. So, the Menopause Diet Plan is a plant-based eating pattern. So we're really big on fruits and vegetables and whole grains. But it's not a vegetarian or a vegan way of eating at all, but it's really heavy on plant foods because plant foods provide so many of the vitamins and minerals and phytonutrients, which are, beneficial compounds found only in plants, that really help to keep you well going into midlife and beyond.
So to help people understand, if it's plant-based and you want them to eat more protein, can you translate that into food?
Okay, I'll let Hillary do that.
So our plan is laid out into a balanced plate approach that's very similar to the infographics that all the health organizations use one way or the other. That will basically say, a plant-forward diet basically means try to get at least 2/3 to 3/4 of your food choices from plant foods that are minimally processed as much as possible. So if we look at this balanced plate as we have in our book, which is similar to the Choose My Plate and others visuals, about a half of that plate would be vegetables, some fruits, so more vegetables than fruits, but both of them are important and make, important contributions. That would be one half of the plate. The other half of the plate would be a quarter protein, emphasizing plant proteins as important as and including in addition to seafood, along with poultry and red meat. So we don't, again, exclude anything. We just encourage more healthful versions. And then about a quarter of that plate, some sort of a whole grain, as Liz said, at least half the time, brown rice, quinoa, whole wheat pastas, or perhaps a starchy vegetable like a sweet potato, winter squash. Legumes are a carbohydrate and a protein, and about 1/3 of their carbohydrates is fiber. So we're really trying to, and then, integrating healthful fats either in cooking, as we always do, or, kind of drizzled on in the form of salad dressings and things like that.
So both of you have said healthy fats and once or twice. So can you help the listeners understand what healthy fats are?
Sure. So healthy fats are basically, plant-based fats. Well, not every single plant-based fat is healthy though, but things like canola oil, olive oil, sunflower oil, nuts, seeds, seafood has healthy fats in it. While salmon is very fatty, it's got omega-3s in it, and omega-3s are really good for your brain and for your heart. Now, and avocados, we should say avocados, peanuts, peanut butter, all those things, almonds. But, again, just because they're healthy doesn't mean you can eat as much as you want. And, as I mentioned before, and as Hillary and I talk about all the time, it's just a fact of life that as you get older, you typically have a smaller calorie budget. So what you want to do is make those calories work for you, make those foods work for you, and choose the most nutrient-rich foods and, within your own level of balance. You have to find your own balance.
We also emphasize a lot the whole concept of proactive eating throughout the day is the best approach to hunger management. And as a population and as a culture, we tend to put everything in front of sitting down and eating a meal. So we talk a lot about, trying to eat your next meal or snack when you're maybe hungry but not starved, because portion control that relies on willpower or good intentions is likely to fail. So, again, we get busy. I mean, we live in a culture where, if anything, people's food intake tends to escalate as the day goes on. And we now understand, based on science around circadian rhythms, how that affects us metabolically, how that affects our blood sugar regulation, all of which we dive into in the book. Those two can have ramifications for weight control, because the same foods kind of pushed to the latter part of the day may metabolically be processed different. And that may make the difference between whether someone is more prone to store leftover calories or kind of thermogenically burn them off. And it may affect whether someone is their body's more willing to let go of stored calories in the form of body fat. But we really kind of have it backwards, because since the advent of electricity, people can eat 24 hours a day, and there seems to be consequences to that.
We don't have it backwards. You and I don't have it backwards, but the way people eat tends to be backwards. And, one of the things we say in the book is don't eat after dinner. And people are like, what? But if you look at all the research, it's probably a good idea not to, because eating after dinner is usually, sitting in front of the TV with, a pint of ice cream or a bag of chips. And not only do you overconsume calories, you're eating at the wrong time of the day.
And a lot of time that happens, let's face it, because people are not eating enough during the day.
Right.
So it's kind of a rebound behavior that dinner doesn't quite seem to be enough. If you entered the evening starving, dinner may feel not quite satisfying enough.
Right.
So this is all aside from, we all know we eat for reasons besides hunger. And mindlessly eating in front of the television is a hard thing to kind of track. So we just try to, we don't make people feel guilty if they occasionally have dessert after dinner. We're just encouraging people to be mindful that your eating pattern influences this, because clearly weight control is not just about the math of calories in and calories out.
It's when
the types of foods we eat, when we eat, and how that affects our blood sugar, our insulin regulation, and these other, hormone factors that can influence whether you store fat or let it go.
So as we enter, because the three of us are women, as we enter our golden years, do the recommendations change? Do we need fewer calories? Do we need less fat? Do we need...
So by golden years, do you mean like 70s?
70s, 80s, 90s, the older you get?
Yeah, sure. I mean, yes, calorie needs do go down, and then it becomes even more important to make sure that you're getting what you need. And what we found in our research too is that age group, and the dietary guidelines just came out and said this too, that age group does not get enough protein. Because I think things that are, if there's illness or if there's pain or if there's something going on, or if there are chewing problems, it's not always easy to get a piece of meat in there. It's just easier to have a cup of tea and, a couple pieces of toast. So yes, vitamin D needs go up after 70, but not much else, changes drastically. It's just that, the calorie needs are coming down, but they have to be it
makes the quality that much more
high quality.
Because people lose lean body mass as they get older. We know that you can build muscle forever, but we're not as efficient at building muscle as we get older. So you need more protein, ideally spread over the day. You need to push on your muscles. But the reality is there is a progressive loss of lean mass as we age, and that will affect your calorie budget. So it makes, as Liz was saying, it makes the food choices that you make that much more important, that there's not too much, as my grandmother was a total little old Irish lady with her tea and toast and pound cake. It's not that there's no room for that, but you need to make sure, like even my parents are in their early 80s, and I'm always like, make sure you eat enough protein as you go through the day, because your body, needs an assist because it's not as efficient as utilizing it.
Right. So you can make muscle during your 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. You just need more protein to do it.
All right. So I know that you do nutritional counseling. What is the most frequent question you get from patients about what they should be eating as they go through menopause, and how do you respond?
Well, hands down, the biggest question that comes up is how can I not get belly fat? And, belly fat, again, is a consequence of declining estrogen levels. Estrogen levels go down and our body naturally redirects fat to the abdomen. So that's such a common thing, and it happens to everybody. Like even the thin women, when you ask them, from the outsider's perspective, they might look like they've looked forever. If you ask them, most of them will say, "Oh, I am a little thicker around the middle." So a lot of it, the focus undoubtedly that often brings them to my office would be weight control. What we now understand, though, is that if you wait until menopause to start thinking about that, you may be way behind the game, because research tells us that starting in your 40s, the average woman is gaining about 1.5 pounds a year. And so because the hormones start to change in their 40s, which is affecting body composition, it affects, all of these things that can chip away at your metabolism. So if you continue to do what you've always done all the way through until you hit menopause, which is, 12 months after your last period, you may be years behind in terms of needing to be more mindful of realizing that your calorie margins are narrower than they've ever been. So you need to start thinking then about incidental calories, calories that we drink as well as calories that we eat.
Like alcohol.
Count, and the importance of women are often really good at walking, but maybe not so much about the strength training piece. And that is critical it's the only card we have in our deck to buoy up our metabolic rate as we get older, is to try to maintain or maybe build some muscle.
Even though it would be great if everyone started to plan for this phase of their life, they're women in their 40s, it's never too late, to make positive changes that'll help your bones, your brain, your heart, your muscles. So
your mood,
your sleep, so many things, your energy levels. So
we're firm believers that when you eat healthfully and you move your body physically, you feel better and you function better. And so from our perspective, successful aging isn't just how many years you're on this planet, because we've all seen people that have stayed alive a long time and had not great quality of life for a lot of it towards the end. So we're really interested in people being able to maintain their own independence, autonomy, levels of physical activity, to stay engaged in life. And nutrition and physical activity definitely matters a lot.
For sure. So what 5 simple, healthful, and early changes to their eating habits can women make to improve their way of eating?
I think they can be, first of all, take stock of their liquid calories. That's one place where you can make some adjustments and trim up a bunch of calories that often are calories for fun anyway. And, unless you're drinking milk or, very limited amounts of juice, we really encourage women to eat more, whole fruit.
We're talking about wine and cocktails, but also, of course, but also coffee drinks. Coffee drinks can be really high in sugar. High. So, and calories. Yeah, go ahead.
So, just be mindful of trying to fill up more on fruits and vegetables, because they take up space in your stomach without loading you down with the calories that more dense, foods for fun and starchy foods and things like that. So realize it's not about just cutting back the amount of food you're eating. Don't just think you can go from eating this much to this much and be happy with it. You need to take some of the extra portions of the more calorie dense, maybe that extra portion of carbohydrates or, pasta, rice. Even people remain big meat eaters or something like that, just trimming it out and then trying to fill up alternatively on whole fruits and vegetables.
Getting enough protein. We're talking about fruits and vegetables, but we want women to get enough protein. It keeps you fuller for longer. It feeds your muscles. It feeds your body. Right. At every meal, 20 grams of protein. So again, it's
if you remember back to the food pyramid days where people would cover half their plate with like rice, potato, pasta, we're saying, like all of these other infographics around healthy nutrition, is yes, you can still have it. Yes, try to make them whole grains, but think of the portion more like a quarter of the plate, not half the plate.
Right.
So you keep saying protein. Let's review again a couple of protein choices that people can make during the day for their meal. Breakfast,
so at breakfast, maybe, milk, eggs, cottage cheese, Greek yogurt. At lunch and dinner, canned tuna is a very simple one. A can of canned tuna is about 4 ounces drained, a small one. That's considered a seafood meal. Tofu, edamame, tempeh, but sliced turkey, chicken,
chicken salad with, maybe use like a reduced fat mayo to save a few calories and still have your egg salad or your chicken salad or something.
And eggs. Did I say eggs? I think I said eggs. And eggs at any time during the day. I'm a big egg fan. but also lean beef. I mean, we're not saying don't have that. We're just saying we want to really focus more on seafood and maybe some plant sources, poultry and plant sources.
We kind of follow the guidance of the American Institute for Cancer Research for red meat consumption in a week. And their recommendation for cancer risk reduction and survivorship is no more than 12 to 18 ounces of red meat per week. So that's beef, pork, lamb, veal. So for comparison, a deck of cards is about 3 ounces. So if a woman is aiming for 12 ounces of red meat a week, you say 4 decks of cards of red meat. And beyond that, go for poultry. Try to go out of your way to get some seafood in there.
Seafood twice a week at least.
Yeah. And then plant proteins like beans, tofu. I mean, sometimes when you say tofu, people's eyeballs explode. Like, oh my God.
We have a great stir fry recipe in the book, though. You will love it with tofu.
Tell us about it.
So it's a recipe that we designed so you can make it 4 ways. So it's vegetable based. There's all these different vegetables. You can use whatever vegetables you have on hand with a nice sauce. And you can use either shrimp or beef or chicken or tofu. So you could do a combination if you didn't have enough of each. But really, the basis of that meal is vegetables. And then, of course, we recommend that you serve it over brown rice, and there's your meal.
Sounds yummy. So what is the top recommendation you'd like the women listening to this podcast to take away?
I think that, women should really focus on what to eat to stay healthy. Make health and wellness your goal rather than weight control per se.
Right. And understand it does take some budget of time to participate in self-care. So like if we had our life made into like a pie chart of all the things we thought were important, like our job and our family and our friends and our hobbies, there's this piece called self-care that gets smushed in favor of all those other things. So there needs to be a certain amount of healthy, selfish defense of a slice of the day to say, I need to, if I want to have a decent meal at the end of this day, I need to think ahead a little bit. And if I don't eat all day long and I'm starved and I get to the end of the day and I don't have anything in my house, well, of course you're going to call Uber Eats or do something impulsive because your brain is just hungry and you don't have a choice. I read an article recently from a psychologist that said that humans wake up with a finite amount of decisions they can spend in a day. So if you spend all your decisions on other things and you get to the end of the day, the thought of deciding what to make for dinner or whether to exercise or not can feel like a complete non-starter. So it made perfect sense to me that planning is like the holy grail of decent eating. Realize if you have a busy week, you need to think about this on the weekends. So plan and think ahead, make shopping lists, have a sense of what your week is going to look like and plan for it.
And don't worry about cooking elaborate meals. We have all these meals that you can assemble in the book. We're talking, it's like a minimum of cooking.
And it could be a veggie omelet with whatever vegetables you have in the fridge, whatever, like the 3 ends of pieces of cheese, and you zap a sweet potato in the microwave and you cut up some tomatoes. That's a balanced plate and it's very unfancy.
Mm-hmm. Sounds good. So is there anything else that you'd like to share with our audience that we haven't discussed yet?
Yes.
So many things.
Sadly, studies are telling us that women are drinking more alcohol in this phase of life than they used to.
Especially during COVID, I've got to.
Yes, exactly. Yes. And so we wanted to write more about this in the book than our editor wanted us to write because, there is a complete and total J-shaped curve of health relating to alcohol consumption. So people like to talk about, red wine is good for you and all of that, which is true in moderation. So a drink a day, up to a drink a day. So it doesn't mean you have to drink a drink a day. A lot of health organizations would prefer people drink less than that. But, to have clarity that a serving of wine is 5 ounces, a 12-ounce beer means a 12-ounce Bud, not a 16-ounce craft beer that has 6.8% alcohol. It's a completely different league. And then a shot and a half of, 80 proof spirits. So, and you can't hog them all for the weekends either. So realize that alcohol, it has calories in it. It can lower your inhibition for what you decide to do with food once you imbibe in it. And you can't kid yourself that there's health benefits if you're drinking beyond that 1 drink a day. And women should be aware, women may do more stress eating at this phase of life. That was something else that we came up with. So I don't think it's too much of a leap to think that women maybe are drinking more to manage stress in part. So I think be good to your liver. You only got one. It's going to be with you forever.
Right.
That is a good note to end on. Be good to your liver. So thank you, Hillary Wright and Liz Ward, registered dietitians, for sharing your expertise and insights with us. I'm sure your advice on how to eat will be helpful for many women. We'll post information about your website along with the notes for this episode so our listeners can follow up and get even more great information from you. I hope you've enjoyed this episode as much as I have. If so, please subscribe to the Positive Pause podcast so that you'll never miss an episode. And please share the information about the podcast with your family and friends. Thank you again to my guests, Hillary Wright and Elizabeth Ward, and thank you for listening. We hope you'll tune in to another episode of the Positive Pause.